Good morning, guys. Today we are going to learn how to do some paper cutting and create snowflakes. So, depending on where you grew up, you might have already done this before. Me teaching in Arizona now, actually a lot of my kiddos did not know how to do this and they really enjoyed it. So this activity can be done by any age group. I just ask that if you are in second grade or younger, I want you to make sure that you have a parent or an adult around, just because you are going to be doing some cutting and the scissors will be close to your fingers. So I do want to make sure an adult is around to help you if you need. Alright, so here are some examples. This is an easier one. This is a little bit more difficult. So I'm going to show you guys a couple different ways to do this today. I'm going to set these aside. So first of all, we need just regular plain paper. If you have colored paper, that's fine. I'm just going to use white paper so that you can see pretty well. Now, we cannot use this paper because it's a rectangle. We need to have a square to cut our snowflake. So if you happen to have some paper that is already square, that's awesome. If not, I did not. So I'm going to teach you how to make sure you have a square from a regular size copy paper or construction paper. So this is a part, if you are second grade or younger, you might need a parent or an adult to help you do this part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my paper horizontal and I'm going to turn my paper down and I'm going to line my corner and edge up with the bottom. So right now it is not lined up. Do you see that little space? So right here I need to make sure this corner goes flat and that this lines up with the edge. Okay? Now you have two options here. You can crease it and hold it, or you can just quickly trace a little line so that you don't have to crease your paper. Okay, which is what I'm going to do because I don't want that crease quite yet. So now I have this extra piece. I'm just going to cut along that line. Make sure you try to cut as straight as possible so that our square is perfect. Okay, now this is going to be an extra, so you can just either toss this or save it to color on. This is actually a really good size to make a bookmark if you want to do that, so you can hold on to that. Now I have a square paper, so now I'm ready to start. Now, the first demonstration I do is going to be an easy fold, because the more times you fold your paper, it gets thicker and fatter and it's hard to cut through. So once you have this square paper, all you'll need is the paper and some scissors, maybe a pencil. Okay, so I'm going to first show you an easy way, and then I'm going to show you a way that's a little bit more challenging if we have some big kiddos watching. So first we're going to fold our paper into a triangle. So we want this to be as exact as possible. So I'm going to match up this corner to the top corner right here. I'm going to slide my finger down the middle so I know it's even, hold it there, and crease across both sides. Okay? Now, keeping it like this, I'm going to fold it over one more time to a smaller triangle. Again, I'm going to line up my corners and my edges as best as possible and then crease my paper. Okay? Now, I'm going to stop here because if I fold it again, it's going to be very thick, and little kiddos, I don't know if you will be able to cut through that. So I'm going to stop here. This is my easy snowflake, okay? Now, we're going to start cutting, but if you're not sure where you want to cut, you can actually, I'll zoom in a little bit so we can see. You can draw your shapes first, okay? So, by the time I'm done cutting, this triangular shape of paper should still be there. If it falls apart, you've made a mistake. So, just to be safe, I'm going to go ahead and draw my shapes before I cut them out. So, you can use triangles, are very easy. That's a really good way to make sure you won't make a mistake. So, you can make them vary, meaning you can make some go taller into the middle of your triangle, or you can keep some short. Actually, I don't think you can see that pencil, so I will use a pen. So maybe I do a triangle here. Now, here's the important part. if I cut this triangle out, my next shape cannot touch this one. I need to have just a little bit of a finger space in between, kind of like when you're writing words, you need a finger space in between your word. If I put my next shape right next to it, I would end up with a giant hole. Okay, so I'm going to do a little space. Maybe now I do a short triangle. Finger space, short triangle, finger space, short triangle, finger space, short triangle. Okay, now these are only shapes on one side. To make our snowflake, we need to cut some shapes from all three sides. So I'm just going to turn and go to this side. Now, like I said, you don't have to do just triangles. Maybe you want to do a half circle. Little space, tall triangle, little space, short triangle. Okay, I'll go to my last side. Short triangle, finger space, tall triangle, finger space, half circle. Okay, and this is actually symmetrical. I did the same shapes on each side. Now I'm ready to cut out my shapes. This is super important also. When you're cutting, you have to make sure you go through all the layers. Don't put your scissors in between like this, because it will not work. Now if you're using little kid scissors, you want to make sure you slide your paper all the way to the bottom. If you cut just on the tip of the scissors, it might not cut. Just a little tip, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and carefully, I'm going to make sure my fingers are out of the way. I'm going to hold on this side and put my scissors on this hand. Don't try to go backwards or across your hands, because that's dangerous. So keeping my fingers on one side, my scissors on the other, making sure I'm cutting through all the layers. I'm going to go ahead and cut out my shapes. Now, you need to make sure that shape comes out. We're subtracting that shape and leaving what's called negative space. Kind of like in math, you subtract numbers. So you need to make sure this piece comes out. And I'm just going to keep a nice little pile over here so I don't make a mess. Now, if your shape doesn't fall out by itself, like that one did not fall out, you can either gently pull it, but I noticed my cut didn't go all the way up, so that's how I need to get that out. Move your fingers as you go. Make sure you're cutting through all the layers. Now, when I'm done with this, I don't know what it's going to look like, because I made up the pattern as I went. Turn your snowflake as you cut. But in real life, when snowflakes are formed, no two snowflakes are the same. So that's kind of interesting. That's a lot of different shapes for a snowflake. So unless you draw it and remember the pattern, every time you cut a snowflake, it'll probably look different than the one before. Make sure you're taking your time, getting through all your layers, keeping your fingers out of the way. Okay, and I'm just going to brush these aside. You can sweep those up and put them right in the garbage if you want. Now, you can see that my triangle shape is still there. My snowflake did not fall apart. If your snowflake is not looking like a triangle anymore, you might have made a mistake. That's okay, you can try again. So, now I'm ready to open up my snowflake. I don't know what it's going to look like. Make sure you do this gently, because sometimes when you're cutting, the pieces stick together. So just make sure you're opening this up very gently, one layer at a time. I'm going to bend this back a little bit because the crease was keeping it open. Okay. All right. So here's my easy snowflake. So you can see my half circle that I cut turned into a whole circle. Most of my triangles turned into diamonds. So one thing that we can see that you just created is called symmetry and reflection. So if I were to draw, I'll use my pencil, an imaginary line right down the middle here, this side is symmetrical with this side. If I folded it back up, all those shapes would line up. That's a reflection. So you just created some symmetry. Okay, now that was an easy snowflake. I'm going to set this aside. If you want to do a more challenging one, keep watching. If you want to do this again, go ahead and cut a new square. I'm going to set this aside for the moment, and I'm going to do a more difficult snowflake. So I already had cut some squares, so I have one ready. If you need to cut another one, just again, you fold your corner down. Make sure this is all the way lined up to the bottom. You can crease that. then you can cut this extra rectangle off and set it aside to either draw on or make a bookmark. Okay, so I have my square. That crease is fine because the first thing we do again is fold it into a triangle. Line up your corners and edges as best as you can. Crease it tight. Fold it again into a smaller triangle. Line up that corner. It's getting thick, so you're going to probably need to use 2 hands to smush it down. Just try to make sure it's as even as you can. Okay, now this is where we stopped last time. To make this a little bit more detailed and intricate, I'm going to fold it a 3rd time. Okay, again, it's getting thicker because more layers are smushed together. So you probably need to use 2 hands. Carefully fold it, line up your edges, line up your corners, and crease it closed as hard as you can because this time it is thicker. We have more layers and it's going to be harder to cut through. Okay, now this time I'm not going to draw my shapes first. I'm just going to go ahead and cut. So one thing, I like having a hole in the middle of my snowflake. I like having this little hole right here. So I'm going to show you how to get that hole in the correct place. So keeping yours closed, and you see it's so thick with the creases it tries to pop up, so just try to keep it down. Now, I'm going to make sure I find the right corner. Okay. Now, having your triangle, well, if you do it this way, this side opens up, the top opens up. So I'm looking for this corner where everything is folded together. And I'm just going to snip off that corner, and that's going to be where my hole is. So if you notice, this is the side that's opening up. This is the side where it was all creased. Now I will have that hole in the middle of my snowflake. Okay, so again, when you're done, you should still have this triangular shape in place. Again, make sure none of your shapes touch each other. You have to have a little space in between. And again, this paper is thicker now, so it's going to be harder to cut through. Again, make sure you slide it all the way down to the base of your scissors, especially if you're using child scissors. Now, I will try to do some more variation this time, meaning I will try to do other shapes besides just triangles. So it will help to make some tall and some short. Just make sure they don't run into each other. So I will start in the middle just so I know where I have some room left. I will do a skinny triangle here. Gently pull that out. Now here, maybe I'll do a square. Remember to keep that space in between. There's a square that I cut out. Okay, so now I have negative space that's a square. Maybe on this side I will do a half circle again. With little tiny shapes, just be super careful that your fingers don't get in the way. I have just enough room on the ends. Maybe I will just do a short tiny triangle. My paper's moving, just make sure you keep everything lined up as best as possible. Oh, that little shape was hard to get out. Okay, now I cut on one side. I still need to take some shapes away from my other two sides for this to work. Okay, I'll do another triangle. Here I have room. Maybe I will do a rectangle. A skinny rectangle. Just be super careful cutting this that you don't run into your other shapes. Okay, so I have a triangle, a rectangle. This side is a fold. This side is not opening up. So this would be a side if you would like to create a heart on your snowflake. These sides open, so the heart would not work. But on my creased side, I can make a heart. So when I open it up, if I want it to be a heart, I'm going to cut, and I will draw this because I know some of you girls will want to see, a half of a heart, just one side of a heart. So I will draw that so you can see. That's a half of a heart, right? The other side would be right here. Now you do not have to do this. I'm just showing you because I know some people, a lot of my kiddos wanted to know, how do I make a heart? Okay, and let's see. I have some short space here, so maybe I will do some little short triangles. Be very careful that your fingers are out of the way. Tiny little shape here. So this is why this one is more difficult, because you have a smaller space to work with. Okay. Sweep all my stuff. Oh, I see some empty space here. I'm going to try to get a tiny little shape here. Alright, so as you can see, my triangle is still in place, so it did not fall apart, so that's good. This one is much more intricate than my other one, meaning I have a lot more shapes, a lot more variation, some big, some small, shapes of all different sizes and shapes, not just triangles like the last one. So I don't know what it's going to look like. I'm going to carefully, especially with the extra fold, they will stick together, like they're sticking together a little bit. Gently open it up, crease it the other way so it stays open. Crease it back so it stays open. And one more. Oh yes, this one was much more intricate. So once this is open, just be super careful. It's very delicate. If you get your finger stuck in it, it will probably rip. So just be very careful. Alright, so now you can see I have that heart shape that I tried to create, and I have my hole in the middle. Alright, this one turned out pretty cool. So these obviously don't look like real snowflakes in nature. This is really just an art form called paper cutting. And now that I've taken away all those shapes, what's left, and I have a black paper underneath so it's easy to see, is called negative space. Now, if you happen to have, these are great the way they are. You could hang them in your room, you could hang them on a window, but if you want to make this a little bit more artistic, like a piece of art, if you happen to have another piece of paper, maybe something that is just a different color, you could gently put some glue on your snowflake and glue it onto a color background, and then you could have an art piece that is paper cutting where you can still see the negative space as a color. So that's just an option. So here are our examples. The first one we did again was our easy snowflake with less folds and less shapes to cut out. And then the second one we did, make sure these scraps go in the garbage. Don't make a mess on your floor or all over your house. Okay, and then the second one we did was a little bit more intricate with a third fold and extra shapes. So I hope you have fun. If you choose to do this, be very careful with your scissors and make sure you clean up your scraps. If you are one of my kiddos and you would like me to see your work, you are welcome to either post it online where our assignments are, or just snap a picture and leave it in the comments. So I hope you guys are all happy and healthy and staying safe at home, and I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. Have a good day.